After making himself invisible and setting fire to his landlord's house, it has not been easy for Griffin to move about without clothes in the biting cold of winter. Not discernible by others, he was, at times, hit by a load carrier or a hansom from behind. Nevertheless, a buoyant sense of impunity and freedom ignited his wild impulse to jest, and he startled people, clapped on their backs, flung their hats astray, plucked a basket or something and let it float in the air. Dogs easily got his scent and followed and barked at him. Curious urchins and others followed him when mud and slime-stained footprints from nowhere appeared in the streets. Luckily, he got an overnight shelter, clothes and food in an all-in-one departmental store. But on being detected in the morning, he was once again a clothless wanderer. But he soon found a costumer's shop in a street in London.
Ironically, invisibility gave me power, but at the same time exposed me to biting cold of January. On the other hand, while clothing protected me from cold, it made me grotesque. Invisible, I could acquire food, but to eat, to fill myself with unassimilated matter, would be to become grotesquely visible again. Snow would settle on me and expose me. Rain, too, would make me a watery outline. Similarly, I could not find way to prevent dust from making me visible. So it was not easy. There were many disadvantages of invisibility than advantages. But my most immediate problem was to cover myself while I was walking on the London streets. Especially covering the face needed some trick. Then I remembered indistinctly that there were some theatrical shops in the area. After a little search, I reached a dirty, fly-blown little shop in a byway near Drury Lane. It displayed tinselled robes, sham jewels, wigs, slippers, dominoes, and theatrical photographs in its windows. The shop was old-fashioned and low and dark, and the house rose above it from 4 stories, dark and dismal. Seeing no one within, I entered. The opening of the door set a clanking bell ringing. I left it open. A man appeared down the shop. Roughly, my plans were watch my opportunity and rummage out a wig, mask, spectacles, and a costume, and go into the world, perhaps a grotesque but still a credible figure, and to rob the house of any available money. We went to stare up and down the street. He came muttering back to the house door.
"Damn the boys!"
Then I tried to follow him wherever he went. He was so keen of hearing the slightest sound that he became very conscious of somebody's presence in the house. Many times he returned to the same spot to examine, and peered behind fixtures, murmuring to himself. I followed him in the queer little inner room, where he had breakfast, and further downstairs in the kitchen and scullery. While he remained there, washing his beggarly crockery, I came upstairs and sat in his chair by the fire. I added some coal to the low fire. Even the slight noise of this brought him up at once, and he stood there, glaring around. Then he peered about and returned, but stopped for a final inspection before he went down. I was following him. He suddenly stopped, and I very nearly blundered into him. He stood looking back, right into my face. Bringing his long, hairy hand on his lower lip, he spoke aloud. "I could have sworn," he said. We were face to face, and very close, and he must have sensed my presence. Grunting, he went on up again. I followed him. The man must have had diabolically acute hearing. he suddenly flashed into rage.
If there's anyone in this house!
Without completing his threat, he climbed further up and entered a room. I slipped into the unfurnished adjacent room. Old clothes were there on the floor. I began routing among them. I probably made a sound forgetfully. He came in stealthily, holding an old-fashioned revolver in his hand. I stood perfectly still, while he stared about open-mouthed and suspicious.
It must have been her. Damn her. Rats!
The first time he suspected it to be a woman. The second time, rats. And he went away, leaving the door open. I followed him. Just then, as I walked on it, a plank creaked. The infernal little brute started going all over the house, revolver in hand and locking door after door and pocketing the keys. When I realized what he was up to, I had a fit of rage, so I knocked him on the head.
Knocked him on the head?
Yes, stunned him as he was going downstairs. Hit him from behind with a stool that stood on the landing. He went downstairs like a bag of old boots.
But, I say, the common conventions of humanity?
Are all very well for common people. But the point was, Kemp, that I had to get out of that house in a disguise, without his seeing me. I couldn't think of any other way of doing it. And then I gagged him with a Louis XIV vest and tied him up in a sheet.
Tied him up in a sheet?
Made a sort of bag of it. Kemp! It's no good you're sitting glaring as though I was a murderer. It had to be done.
But still, in England today, and the man was in his own house, and you were, well, robbing?
Robbing? Confound it! You'll call me a thief next. Surely, Kemp. You're not fool enough to dance on the old strings. Can't you see my position?
And his too.
I went up past my impromptu bag to the room containing the old clothes. The room looked out upon the street. Outside, the day was bright. A brisk traffic was going by. Fruit carts, a hansom, a four-wheeler with a pile of boxes, a fishmonger's cart. Everything that could possibly of service to me, I collected in the clothes storeroom. Finally, I chose a mask of the better type, dark glasses, greyish whiskers, and a wig. I swathed myself in calico dominoes and some white cashmere scarves. I could find no socks, but the hunchback's boots were rather a loose fit and sufficed. In a desk in the shop were 3 sovereigns and about 30 shillings worth of silver. And in a locked cupboard, I burst in the inner room were 8 pounds in gold. I could go forth into the world again, equipped. Was my appearance really credible? I took my looking-glass down into the shop and surveyed myself. I unlocked the shop door and marched out into the street. In 5 minutes, a dozen turning intervened between me and the costumier's shop. No one appeared to notice me very pointedly. My last difficulty seemed overcome.
And you troubled no more about the hunchback?
No.
What happened when you went out into the Strand?
Oh, disillusionment again. I thought I had impunity to do whatever I chose. Everything. At last, faint with the desire for tasteful food, first I went to a restaurant. But eating in public without a face would raise questions. I went into another place and demanded a private room. I'm disfigured, I said, badly. They looked at me curiously, but of course it was not their affair. And so at last, I got my lunch. That afternoon, I went over the heads of the things a man reckons desirable. No doubt, Invisibility made it possible to get them, but it, at the same time, made impossible to enjoy them when they were caught.
But how did you get to Ipping?
I went there to work. I had one hope, a way of getting back, of restoring what I have done, when I choose, when I have done all I mean to do invisibly. And that is what I chiefly want to talk to you about now.
What were you planning to do when you were heading for Port Burdock? Had you any plan?
I was going to clear out of the country. Now the weather is hot, and invisibility possible to make for the south. Especially as my secret was known, and everyone would be on the lookout for a masked and muffled man. You have a line of streamers from here to France. My idea was to get aboard one and run the risks of the passage. Thence I could go by train into Spain, or else get to Algiers. It would not be difficult. There a man might always be invisible and yet live, and do things. I was using that tramp as a money box and luggage carrier. Then I decided of more appropriate way to get my books and things sent over to meet me. But the filthy brute must have hidden my books, Kemp. Hidden my books. If I can lay my hands on him...
Best plan to get the books out of him first.
But where is he? Do you know?
He's in the town police station, locked up, by his own request, in the strongest cell in the place.
But
that hangs up your plans a little.
We must get those books. Those books are vital.
Certainly. We must get those books.
Blundering into your house, Kemp, changes all my plans. For you are a man that can understand. In spite of all that has happened, in spite of this publicity, remain great possibilities, huge possibilities. You have told no one I'm here?
That was implied.
No one?
Not a soul.
Ah, now. What I want, Kemp, is a goalkeeper, a helper, and a hiding place. An arrangement whereby I can sleep and eat and rest in peace, and unsuspected. I must have a confederate. With a confederate, with food and rest, 1,000 things are possible. For an invisible man, eavesdropping is easy. Invisibility is useful in getting away. It's useful in approaching. It's particularly useful, therefore, in killing. I can walk round a man, whatever weapon he has, and I can choose my point and strike as I like, dodge as I like, escape as I like.
Kemp's hand goes to his moustache as he overhears some movement downstairs. He is hardly ever listening to what Griffin is saying.
And it is killing we must do, Kemp. It is killing we must do.
I'm listening to your plan, Griffin, but I'm not agreeing mine. Why killing?
Not wanton killing, but a judicious slaying. And that to establish a reign of terror. Yes, no doubt it's startling. But I mean it. A reign of terror. The invisible man must take some town like a burdock and terrify and dominate it. He must issue his orders. He can do that in 1,000 ways. Scraps of paper can be thrust under doors issuing orders. And all who disobey and all those who defend the disobedient must be killed.
It seems to me, Griffin, that your confederate would be in a difficult position.
No one would know he was a confederate. Hush! What's that downstairs?
Nothing. I don't agree to this, Griffin. Understand me, lone wolf. Publish your results. Take the world, take the nation at least, into your confidence. Think what you might do with 1,000,000 helpers.
There are footsteps coming upstairs.
Nonsense.
Let me see.
I don't agree to this. Why dream of playing a game against the race? How can you hope to gain happiness?
Traitor!
Halfway up the staircase was Colonel Adie, the recipient of Kemp's letter, the chief of the Burdock police. He was staring aghast at the sudden appearance of Kemp, followed by the extraordinary sight of clothing tossing empty in the air. He saw Kemp felled and struggling to his feet. He saw him rush forward and go down again, felled like an ox. An invisible foot trod on Colonel Adie's back. A ghostly patter passed downstairs. He heard the two police officers in the hall shout and run, and the front door of the house slammed violently.
My God! The game's up! He's gone!